Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Everyone's doing well. Inshallah, today we're going to continue from the 26th word. We've been studying it for a couple weeks now, and it has been on the topic of divine determination or qadar, as well as choice, human choice. And the author of the text initially introduced us saying that he would, utilize 4 topics and focus in on especially on the relationship between divine determining and power of choice. And as a very sort of brief and incomplete summary, the first topic focused perhaps on, some of these words. We can substitute other words for it, but just for the sake of convenience, the first topic focused on human responsibility, as well as perhaps mapping out the framework of how choice and divine determination lay out in my life. And, we talked at length about how at the end of the day, I find myself in need of choice, right? In terms of acting with purpose and intention and not being heedless, and recognizing that there will be consequences from the apparent actions that I'm taking. And on the flip side, perhaps, we've talked about divine determining and how I'm also in need of that. I'm in need of a disposer of all affairs. I'm in need of recognizing that my actions are not the true causes of anything, that I can't attribute to myself anything. And that all of this, all of this are things that I find myself witnessing, recognizing in my own reality, recognizing from my own firsthand experiences, right? That when I look at myself and my own creation, that I find that I have choice. I need to make choices in my life. And that at the same time, that there is a source of absolute knowledge and absolute wisdom, that there is a source of existence of everything, of which I can conclude is a divine determiner of everything, right? And the second topic, the author said, was more of a sort of scholarly look onto the specific compatibility of divine determining with choice. And it's kind of dove into perhaps the technicalities of how that might work. But perhaps critical to that is that when I experience divine determining, that I'm experiencing a kind of knowledge, and that I can try to understand divine determining as a sort of knowledge. But, when I, again, bring it back to myself, that what choice means for me, what the sliver of choice, I think it's, that seems like the more right terminology for me, that I have choice, but it's a sliver. That when I'm faced with the sort of limited array of options, my responsibility looks to how I respond given such options, that it's not about the effect or the consequence or the output, because I'm not the creator of those, but rather in that very moment, how I utilize that sliver of choice. And now we've kind of forayed into the third topic, which the author has said would be about the proofs of divine determining, and talking about how belief in divine determining is one of the pillars of belief. And as was mentioned last week, a pillar is something that needs to be sturdy. Other things are put on top of it. So in this third topic, initially, we took a look at verse 59 from the Quran from chapter 6, nor anything fresh or dry, but it is inscribed in a clear book. And so far, the text has been kind of drawing our gaze towards creation itself, right? And the signs within that creation that point to divine determining, or that might act as proofs of divine determining, like balance and order and regularity, and the giving of form to things. And the most sort of apparent or accessible example of this is usually a seed of a plant or a grain, and that how it holds a sort of index, if you will. The author calls traced by divine determining, or a sort of plan of divine determining. And so in these, I know we read this paragraph last week. I might read it again just to continue from the topic. So we'll continue, I guess, trying to think about the ways in which we can see signs within creation that points the necessity of divine determining. Is this something that I can really confirm in my life? Let me pause there. If anyone else has anything else they'd like to mention from prior weeks, they can feel welcome to pitch in. That's just my brief take on some of the topics we've discussed so far. And if not, I'll start reading again from this paragraph. I know we read it, but just to resituate ourselves. Oh, but before that, Brother Birkan can feel free.
Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So the first sentence, it says, belief in divine determining is one of the pillars of belief. Pillars of belief. So this is something that we hear a lot. We accustomed to hear, especially if you are from a background which is similar to my background, in which the young children are, taught to memorize pillars of belief. So the sentence, it sounds like very traditional in that sense. It's like, oh yeah, there are 6 pillars of belief as they taught you in the primary school or at that age. And as you know, one of them is the belief in divine determining. And then you can read it in different ways, but one way or another, I guess, having this connection to this traditional understanding of things, at least nowadays, seems really important to me. And what I mean with this traditional understanding is the understanding of belief, understanding of religion, understanding of Quran, as it is studied by generations and generations, studied by countless scholars, studied by countless believers, the ideas shared by thousands, millions, billions of people, ideas that are discussed criticized and refined by hundreds and thousands of people, or millions and billions of people. So this way of thinking about the tradition started to seem really important to me, especially recently, as I started to see one by one most of these pillars being neglected, being denied by believers, including myself. Like just saying that, yes, it is a pillar of belief, it doesn't count as not being denied or not being neglected, let's say. I might say, yes, divine determining is a pillar of belief. It's essential. My understanding, my worldview as a believer relies on, as Ayşenur said at the beginning, sits on top of my understanding of divine determining. So it is very essential, I can say, but then I can neglect it in my daily life or in my discussions. And I started witness this again and again with different pillars. One day, pillars, the belief in angels is, neglected or denied. Another day, belief in prophets. Another day, belief in divine determining. And interesting, probably there are a lot of reasons, many of them being political, definitely not philosophical or intellectual, mostly political and psychological reasons. But it's really interesting that divine determining, together with belief in prophets, are probably the most common elements of belief that are denied and neglected. I would say, especially nowadays, but only because due to my ignorance of the history of Islam. The other day I was listening a guy who were saying that you think most of the, you think all this criticism about the hadith, the narration from the prophets are about our generation, about our time. But he was saying, the same critics were there even thousands years ago. Thousands would be too much, so it's in total already less than 2,000. But anyway, so hundreds years ago. So probably it's the same with divine determining as well. We know, just a little bit from the history that it was denied. So this first sentence, I guess, by itself, saying it. So I don't know what was the reason author put it in that way. Divine determining is one of the pillars of belief, as if closing the door for its denial. I think this is so important. And again, for you, like taking the chance, not the chance maybe, but let's say chance, taking the chance of being named as something old-minded or being traditional, or who cares? I think a traditional understanding of belief, as I defined the tradition a few minutes ago, again, it seems to me so important, especially nowadays. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you for that comment. And I guess, I think I think you're right to say that we should be paying careful attention to these pillars of belief. And we do find, as you mentioned, whether in history or at the present moment, that they are usually the ones that end up being under attack or refutation or denial or anything of that sort. One thing that I find, sort of not intriguing or interesting, but significant for me is that, just as we were talking about how I am in need of divine determining, right? As a human being, I want to know that I want this sense of security that permeates throughout all aspects of my life, all stages of my life. And I take great comfort in the necessity of divine determining, of knowing that I am not, let alone left to my own devices, left to any other, human beings' devices or accidents or chaotic happenings, that I am being nurtured, because all of this looks to each other, right? Like sustenance, nurturing, education, security, the past, present, future, all of them look to each other. And I find that this is a very essential human need that I have in my life, especially when I'm faced. Sorry for that. Let me use my water powers. Okay, there we go. Especially I was saying, especially when I find that, I'm left confused or needy in the face of things that I come face to face with in my life. Upheavals, right? I need a reference point or a pillar, literally a pillar. And so where I'm connecting this to is that I think that each of those pillars of belief look to essential pillars of human need that I have, of needs that I have. That just as essential as they are in perhaps fortifying or having a correct belief, right? That's outlined for me, that they look to needs that I have as a human being. That something will be completely absent or not right with how I view the world, how I view myself, if I neglect one of them, if I deny one of them. My foundations will be shaky. The foundations of my sense of self in the world and my needs for contentment and security and happiness. So with that, I guess, this acts as a reminder for me that as I'm reading this text, it's really important for me to be able to say to myself, is this something I can confirm or not? How do I engage with this? Okay, these are the outline pillars of belief. How do I engage with them? How do I make them witness the realities in my life? Or not make them, but how do I see them as witnessed realities? How can I live with the fulfillment that they bring into my life? And what is absent in my life if they are not there? What is lacking if they are not there? And I was especially thinking, I'll read this, I guess, in a moment, but here I want to ask the question, to myself, is what the author is saying, can I see that as a proof of, like, I've concluded that I need divine determining, but can I conclude as well that what he discusses can act as a means of proof or as a means of making firm the establishment of the necessity of divine determining in my life? And that's a question I'm putting up in the air for now. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let me start reading, at least, again, I'm going to take it from this paragraph onwards. Furthermore, the well-measured proportions of everything clearly show divine determining. Yes, whatever living creature is considered, it is as though its form and measure emerged from a wisely and skillfully wrought mold. For it to receive such a measure, form, and shape, either there has to be a truly wondrous and infinitely intricate physical mold, or else pre-eternal power cuts out the form and shape according to a well-proportioned immaterial mold that exists in knowledge and comes from divine determining and clothes it in it. For example, look carefully at this tree or that animal. You will see that the particles, which are lifeless, deaf, blind, and conscious, and similar to one another, are in motion in its growth and development. In some of the being's intricate extremities, the particles halt as though seeing, knowing, and recognizing the place of fruits and benefits. Then, in another place, they change their direction as though following some important aim. That means they are in motion in accordance with the immaterial, measured proportions of the tree or animal, which come from divine determining and are governed by those proportions. And I'm just going to kind of ask one question and then continue reading, which is that, because this is a question I have, is what Nursi is describing here, it's like I can take it as a sign of power or wisdom or knowledge, but I'm not quite sure how it specifically looks to divine determining. That I'm a little shaky, or I'm having some difficulty in making that explicit connection. Since there are the manifestations of divine determining to this extent in physical and visible things, certainly the forms with which things are clothed with the passing of time and the states acquired through the motions they perform will also be dependent on the ordering of divine determining. And before I continue, I'll let Brother Birkan talk.
Assalamualaikum. For your question, little implicit, little explicit question about how this is related to divine determining. So the way I see the author is giving us a, let's say, a kind of new, maybe even novel understanding of divine determining. When you say divine determining, the first thing comes to my mind, usually before studying, reading this text, would be, oh, the God decided what I'm going to do, or God decided how many fruits a tree would have. It's about making a decision. But author here expands this understanding and says divine, as he did at the very beginning in the first and second topics as well. He says that divine determining is the knowledge that you experience in the creation. And with the knowledge, I mean, he says, the forms, proportions, the aims, the order. These are the things that I take, or I call as the knowledge. So in this paragraph, for instance, it's talking about the well-measured proportions of everything. Whether living or not, what happens to them always of a proportion, well-measured proportion. it receives such a measure, form, and shape. So it's when you look at its shape, its form, you will realize that there is a well-measured thing there. So this is divine determining. It's not happening haphazardly. It's like the shape of an orange. It's as if it's come from a mold, as author says. So this mold is the part of the knowledge, which is divine determining. My shape, the number of hair, that I have, or the rate of decline in my hair, it's all out of a well measure, of a well measure. So this is divine determining, author says. So yes, it is about the decisions, but it is like the decision, the emphasis here is about knowledge. Knowing that what happens, what will happen, what happened. And the knowledge that connects past, present, and future. It's interesting, like we're not used to think about such things, like the shape or form of a thing, the shape of an orange. It is so ordinary for us that we don't even question. But the fact that it is so ordinary for us, it means it has been following such a great order. Its form and its shape was very well designed and proportionate to all previous and future and present instances. It is coming from knowledge. It's coming from infinite knowledge, divine knowledge. This is divine determining, author says. This is how I understand it.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for that comment. Yeah, I mean, I recognize that when talking about divine determining, there's this sort of, not even emphasis, but it's directly talking about, as you said, measurement or form or proportion. But it's just, it's difficult to like reframe it in my mind because of these sort of pre-established notions of what divine determining is or ought to be, or and if it is about form and measurement and all the other things in order, how to differentiate that from, I don't know, qualities that I might just attribute or directly associate with power and wisdom, and perhaps they all look to each other. But I'm going to pause, and Abdurrahman can go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Just expanding with a personal, I guess, anecdote on what has already been said. Maybe a bit more practical sense of it, like how I experience and maybe the difficulties I have with seeing divine determining. Like for example, I went to the Grand Canyon last week, and when I read this sentence, it said, "For it to receive such a measure, form, and shape, and power cuts out the form and shape according to a well-proportioned immaterial mold that exists. and so on. It reminded me of almost a sentence I heard exactly when I was there, which is, over hundreds of millions of years, the wind has eroded the rock and slowly cut the shape and the form, and it has formed this vast canyon. It's a Grand Canyon. And it's huge. It's extremely beautiful. Anyone who goes there, especially if you go into it, you can't deny the beauty and the power that you see there. Like, it's so apparent. But at the same time, I also find that even though this beauty, these names of beauty and power are so apparent, for some reason my mind doesn't go to, oh, then there was a creator that has the attributes or has the names of beauty and power. It somehow it goes to, oh, the wind and the rock and the mindless constant erosion from the rain and everything is what formed this. And I think it has somewhat to do with what Brother Bikram was saying about, the shape of an orange. We're so used to it. We're so used to like taking these things for granted that when I see the Grand Canyon, or I see like these vast rocks that I find to be very beautiful, I find to be very awe-inspiring, I have the question within me, but really, was it created intentionally? Was it actually designed? Like it doesn't seem like I'm so conditioned for the other way. Like, I'm conditioned to on the premise that it happened by itself. And I'm just like, oh, it just happened by random rain, but random wind. And I'm like, what makes wind or rain actually random from my perspective? Because, like, being honest with myself, yeah, I'll say, okay, I can say God creates the wind, God creates the rain. But do I truly actually believe that God determined that Grand Canyon to be formed in that? Like, I have like I can see that I'm not fully convinced of that, because I'm like, oh, the rain is random, the wind is random, to some degree. Like, there's a doubt in my mind. And I think maybe just like an answer to myself to why, or to an answer to that doubt in my mind is, as I said before, the names are apparent. They're very clear. Beauty, the power, the meticulous rocks with very, very minute designs. And then at night, the view, the sounds, the greenery, everything has been placed. Like, it's all very apparent. And I think it's crazy to then see those names and then jump to the fact, oh, it happened by itself, or it's random, because it's contradicting the names that I am seeing, that everyone does see. That's why people love going there. But for some reason, we then attribute it to randomness, or we attribute it to happening by itself. So there's like a severe contradiction there, which for some reason feels normal to do. For some reason, I guess I've been conditioned for that. I'm not sure, but I think that would be an answer to like that doubt, to be like, no, this was divine determining. This is what I see. Like, I'm just explaining what I see. I see the names, and for a name to exist, there must be a creator of it. And that's just a personal anecdote that I see for this paragraph. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Jazakallah khair. I guess it's like it's in these practical examples or moments in which the pillars that we hold as pillars of belief come to question, or we try to locate them or situate them into that moment and see if they speak or not. But as you were saying, I guess just, at the end of the day, I like what you really emphasize is beauty, right? Beauty in rocks, beauty in a desert. And my ability to recognize that beauty and engage with that beauty and all the other qualities that are present there, that allow me to ask the question of where those qualities are coming from and from what they can come from. I will let Philly Gang speak now.
Jazakallah khairan. So Abdurrahman's point is extremely important. Not that, you should go spend your time going that distance, spending all this money and then coming back with doubts and denial. Not that part, but the part that, so when we talk about like the God creating things, or God deciding things, God making a measure over everything, or anything about God, we take it as an alternative to, or at least we have this tendency to take it as an alternative to what we observe or what we are taught in schools. So what I mean is the innocent person like Abdurrahman, for instance, like let's talk about a hypothetical person called Abdurrahman. Let's say Abdurrahman goes to Grand Canyon and reads some signs saying that, the wind eroded these rocks, and then now we have the Grand Canyon after 2 to 3 billion years. And then Abdurrahman goes to Halakha, where a friend with a long beard says the Grand Canyon was created by God. And the form of Grand Canyon is due to Qadr, divine determining. Then Abdurrahman says, wait a second. So it's either created by God or the wind erodes rock. So we are kind of like, we find ourselves between these two choices all the time. At least myself. I, like, to be honest, when I was first reading this text, I was saying, like, what are you talking about, Nursi? Like, what you are describing is the genes, like the shape of a tree, form of an orange is from its gene. If it's not a living creature, there are some other mechanisms to give the form and shape. Why you are talking about divine determining here? Because again, I am like squeezed between these two options that I have no space to move. I think the mistake we do is that when we say God creates things or this art of divine determining, we feel as if we have to neglect, we have to deny all these, the mechanisms that we observe in the creation, genes, for instance, or wind, or erosion. They are there, like I see the DNA one way or another. I observe the erosion, I observe the wind. So belief in God should not necessitate denial of any such experience, observation, but it should make, a sense of them. So I think when author says the form of Grand Canyon, due to the divine determining, he means that every instances of knowledge that you experience when you observe wind, when you observe erosion, and every other instances of knowledge, they are attributed all together. They are attributed to divine knowledge, divine determining. So it's not, the belief in that sense is not about the explaining mechanisms or actions. It's about the explaining the existence of the qualities that you see when you observe these actions. So you observe, you see knowledge there. No matter how you name it, it doesn't matter. You name it as erosion, you name it as wind, doesn't matter. Knowledge is there and you experience it, you see it. Knowledge is there. Whom are you going to attribute it to? Are you attribute the knowledge to wind and say that wind knows? Are you going to attribute the knowledge to rock and say that rock knows it or not? I guess that's the distinction. It's about the qualities and where, to what, to whom we attribute them. Otherwise, wind is there, or the thing as I call as wind is there. But the knowledge I experience with wind is not from wind. It cannot be from wind. It doesn't matter if I call it as erosion or not. The interaction between wind and the rock and the knowledge I see there, I cannot attribute neither to wind or rock. So I guess that's the distinction. It's not about denying the erosion. Yes, I see the erosion. Somebody call it as erosion, doesn't matter. Some other people call it, what is in Turkish? Okay, that was a lame one. Some others call it erosion, doesn't matter. Some others call it, I don't know, I'm just making up, toki. The name doesn't change the fact that you see knowledge there. And author is talking about knowledge now, the quality that you observe.
Jazakallah khair. We have another question here.
Yeah, just like a brief question. And probably, maybe the question doesn't have value, but it exists in me. So let me just ask it. But I feel like there's also this doubt or like okay, let's say I see this, I think I see beauty, I think I see power, but then, you know, someone else could come and say, oh, that's just because you're ignorant, you don't understand. You know, the wind does this, the rain does that, and then over 2 billion years, it's simple, it just happens. And then you thinking that there's like some knowledge or power or something, it's just because you don't understand. And it sounds silly to say this, even though like it is a problem that I'm sure we all experience, like this little voice in us that's like, you know, it's just, or like other people telling us this, like, for example, when we were walking at some point, we were talking about how like these plants were like bursting through the rocks, huge rocks. And I was like, wow, that's so impressive. And then a friend said, it's just acid. And I was just thinking, oh, it's just acid. Like, it makes it so simple. It makes it so like, I'm like, is it still not impressive? It still seems impressive, but
You get deprived of so much there, though.
I guess, is it inhuman or is it false to be like, oh, I feel like there's knowledge here. It seems you experience the knowledge name. You can't really, it's hard to define it. Like, oh, the knowledge is in this point. Or maybe you can say the knowledge is in this point, but you experience it. You experience a feeling of it. And then you try to attribute, then you say, oh, there was a creator of this because the names are so apparent. But you can't like scientifically or analytically be like, the knowledge exists within this. Or maybe I'm wrong. I'm not sure. But there's like a difficulty that I feel there, which also can add some doubt onto seeing divine determining. If you have a comment, or if you understood what I said and you have a comment, I'd appreciate that.
I'm just gonna jump in before I let them speak. This isn't to answer your question, but just to kind of respond or react to it a little bit, which is that, I mean, one, there's a difference between giving a name to something and expecting that name to explain away what's happening. But also, I just think in a different dimension of things, right? And again, this isn't an answer to the question itself, but like you get deprived, I get deprived of so much from that experience of a flower bursting through a rock the moment I say, or I just call it, this is just acid. I get deprived of eternal happiness in that moment, right? Because that flower bursting through the rock, what it makes me feel, what it makes me ask, what it leads me to, can open in that very moment a connection to a source of eternal happiness and fulfillment in all of my human needs. And so it's just, and I guess this goes for many things, you know, like if I'm having a conversation with someone and they're in a bad mood and they say something mean to me, right? Like, okay, this happened the other day. I was driving and like someone was really mean to me to the extent that like they rolled down all their windows and the people in the back seat, like the half their body was like hanging out of the car and they just started yelling at me. And I got so emotional afterwards after I was driving, and I'm getting emotional thinking about it because I was thinking to myself, why are people so mean? Like, why do they have to be so mean? You know? Now, if I explain that away by just saying, oh, they were in a grumpy mood, or, you know, or they just, you know, acted like this because of X, Y, and Z. If I explain it away, then I'm depriving myself of this beautiful, compassion-filled moment there for me, which is that I want niceness in my life. I want compassion in my life. I want mercy in my life. And it's so funny that like this moment that I initially deem as, oh, I just don't want to think about it, people are mean, that it in fact is a moment full of compassion in terms of how it's being created for me. Then suddenly this door, and I guess that's what it means approaching an event with, you know, with Bismillah, then that event gets transformed into like the gateway to eternal happiness. So I just wanted to, that's my reaction, but Philly Gang can respond.
Assalamu alaikum. So I guess we should stop making such expensive travels is the answer. We shouldn't waste money. We should stay home, brother. So
You want to say something?
yeah, okay. So something more serious than that. So I think this, like the last question was more about, I would say the topic of waswasa or whispers, because it's a matter of how would you treat such questions, because those questions are actually the choices that are being put in front of us, aren't they? Like the topic we are studying is qadar, and in terms of what we do, we were talking about selecting among options, and such options like or whispers are options. Actually, there are multiple options that are put in front of me. One of them is that, oh, it happens by wind or by erosion. Another one is no, it cannot happen by wind or erosion, it cannot happen by itself, there must exist a knowledgeable, all-powerful one who is doing that. So tying that question to our topic in general, in the larger sense, yes, this is very beautiful to have such questions, such options, because the existence of such options will make me see the difference, which one really makes sense to choose. But how am I going to choose the correct one? So in there, now this topic comes a little more practical and maybe a little out of our today's topic, but since Abdurrahman was asking, I would like to slightly touch upon it. So like listening to what is given to me, my creator is already giving me all those needs and desires. So like my feelings are there, my logic is there, everything is given in there. And in my practical life, if the same thing was happening to my car, this is why I love giving the example with my car. If the same erosion, like I came out of my house and I see that windows of my car is broken, and then the all four tires are flat, and then all around I see scratches in the around the car. So, and somebody comes and says, yeah, this is erosion. Like it happened very quickly, but, or wind make this sort of stuff. When I see this, the immediate thing comes to my mind is, and if I just go and investigate it a little bit, somebody must have poked the tires and break the window and whatnot. So I do observe some conscious will at play, some power at play. Okay, wind seems to have some sort of power, but it's lacking all these conscious, willful acts. So this is why I would say, are you making fun of me? So are you, did you do it? I would ask to the person who is trying to deviate my attention, for example. So when it comes to the existence, though, for whatever reason, I am being expected by the society, I mean the current society, to fall into this, like accepting it as a fact. Yeah, wind makes it, erosion makes it. But when it is my own car, something directly affects me because of my pocket, like money is going out of it, I would say, I mean, stop being stupid. It doesn't make any sense, right? So I would say we are already given those like common sense. The creator is already telling me from within, with my conscience, that I know what it means to be conscious, what requires consciousness, what requires knowledge. But if somebody with a title, with a British accent, as this became our motto, with a British accent comes and says, well, it's acid or it is, I don't know, wind, I would say, okay, yeah, go ahead. Like you can speak. I cannot prevent you from speaking, but I know that it doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't take you serious in this sense. So I would say this handling of such options, false options are there so that I appreciate and clearly see the true answer. But sometimes we are thinking too much into the question or the options. And then, as it happens in multiple choice questions, sometimes you say that, oh, is there a trick in this question? This answer seems to be obviously the correct answer, but maybe not. Then you start overthinking on the question and you choose the wrong answer. Sometimes I feel like this is what we do. So practically speaking, the practical aspect of this matter is we should learn or put some effort to learn how to handle those waswas. I would say.
Jazakallah khairan. So I have one I don't know what it is, one something to your the example, because so when it comes to wind and erosion, it's kind of different, because we do see, like it happens in front of our eyes, that the wind comes and take off some, let's say, part of rock or a soil. So we do see it's happening in one sense. So when somebody comes and tells me that, oh yeah, this the change in the shape of the soil in front of you, it was because of wind, I wouldn't say again in one sense that this is stupid, because I also saw it. Yeah, it was wind, I would say. So there's this difference I think between the car example or the wind example. Again, in one sense, and this is in one sense that all this explanation of denial relies on. So if you wait in front of the Grand Canyon, before it was a canyon, for 2 billion years, and you just observe it, you would realize that nobody using shovels or anything, but it's just quote unquote happening. You would see it, and I truly believe it. That is a true, let's say, true example. But what is missing, which goes back to your example. So your example is not about using a special tool to poke the tires. But the gist of the example is, again, the qualities that you observe there. And that's the reason, it is really interesting and unique to maybe writings of Nursi, that he talks about the non-existence when it comes to denials. When it comes to disbelief, Nursi talks about non-existence. Because disbelief has to be about denying something exists. You have to say, no, this doesn't exist. That's the gist of disbelief, unbelief, or denial. Hence the word kafir, covering up. So you have to deny that something exists. So when you say it's just acid, yes, it is acid. Like we agree in a subset of what exists. I exist, there's an acid there. I agree there is a plant there. I agree there is a crack in the rock there. But I also observe something else. You do as well, which is will, which is power, which is knowledge. I observe it. And I say, yes, I observe it, and I believe in them. But what you do, you say, oh no, you think there's knowledge, but actually there does not exist knowledge, or there isn't knowledge. It is acid. No, I know there's acid. But on top of acid, there's also knowledge. But you are denying that. So this is the alternative option which is given to us. Deny what exists. People thinks that repeating what we observe in different words, talking about them with different names, can deny existence of things, like all these qualities. What I say as a believer, no, I'm sorry, but it doesn't work like that. If I see an artful piece, I see art there. I don't care how much, the games, tricks you play to deny the existence of art, but you cannot make me accept that because I believe in art. The same way I believe in knowledge power. When I see it, I see it. I don't care what you say. And I'm sure you see it as well. You just pretend that you don't see. You are being kafir, covering it up. So and one example which is similar to what Abdurrahman said is I was reading a book in which the author was mocking the believers. The book is a mathematical book. It's about the system theory and so on. He was saying, previously we thought, the things happening that way because there was some purpose or something. I don't remember the exact word he used, but probably purpose. And then he said, then we learned about the system theory, and now we know that it happens because it's the minimum of a functional. And so just because it's the minimum point, the optimal point of an equation or a function, and that's the reason it happens that way. You just introduced more knowledge. Like before, to me, it was all about the end product. I didn't know about what's between. And you just tell me that this end product actually out of more knowledge. So I believe in more knowledge then. My understanding of divine knowledge, not the divine knowledge, but my understanding of divine knowledge expanded. Thank you. So I guess we should be aware that what is the option that is given to us? An option is always, no exception, is always denying something that you observe.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for all of those comments. Yeah, inshallah, we can continue if there's no other comments or questions by anyone. Okay, I'm going to take it from the top from this paragraph, inshallah. Since there are the manifestations of divine determining to this extent in physical and visible things, certainly the forms with which things are clothed with the passing of time and the states acquired through the motions they perform will also be dependent on the ordering of divine determining. In a seed are two manifestations of divine determining. One is evidence and points to the clear book, which is a title of will and the creational commands. The other is theoretical and points to the clear record, which is a title of divine knowledge and the divine command. Evident divine determining specifies the physical nature, states, and parts of the tree which the seed comprises, while the theoretical divine determining specifies the stages, states, forms, motions, and glorifications, tasbihats, which the tree will undergo and perform over the period of its life, and which are in the seed and will be created from it. These stages, states, forms, and acts, which constantly change and are called its life history, each have a regulated measure in accordance with divine determining, the same as the tree's branches and leaves. So let's go back because he's doing something interesting here, but I'm not quite sure if I get it. So he's saying there are two manifestations of divine determining. One is evident and looks to the clear book, and the other is theoretical and points to the clear record. The evidence specifies the physical nature, states, parts of the tree. The theoretical specifies the stages, states, forms, motions, and glorifications. I'm not quite sure if I understand the significance of this evident and theoretical distinction he's making, as well as the exact distinction, the nature of the distinction between them. If anyone wants to chime in, maybe take a moment to think about it as well. because he's saying things will be depend on the ordering of divine determining, and then goes into this explanation of evident and theoretical. And yeah, we have a hand here.
I mean, I have no clue, but until someone else chimes in, I
Yeah.
guess I'll just talk.
I don't know. You were nodding when I was reading it, so I was like, "Oh, he definitely has a clue."
No, I have no clue. But I don't know if this is relevant at all to what Nursi is saying, but something which always astounds me. And here he's talking about a seed and a tree and the later stages of a tree. But what I think about is light, light coming from different stars. And the way that we measure like how old the earth is or how old the universe is, like, you know, we're estimating, is just by looking at how far or how long ago did this light actually come, you know, 13 billion years or 13 point whatever billion years that so far they've found. And to me, it always amazes me that there is a light always going at the same speed, and that this history has been recorded, as it says here, there's a clear record for 13 billion years that it hasn't changed. We can look and we can see it. It's just like a timeline which has been recorded. And at the same time, when I look right now, so like maybe trying to understand it from the lens of what Nursi is saying about divine determining is, when I look at light, I see it in the present time. For myself, I see it like, you know, in the present, I see light coming, light exists within everything else, and it has a relationship with everything else. I have a relationship with my eye, has a relationship with even emotions or everything. So there I can see that there's like a will, I can see that there was like an intention and design there. But then I can also see that whoever created the light at this moment must have also created it 13 billion years ago, or that there and had kept it being created through that history, through that time. And anyways, when we're talking about an absolute creator, I think time is a very relevant thing to just us. So it doesn't seem to make sense to even like separate. Like it seems obvious to say that, yeah, whoever created me at this point, anyways, if it's an absolute being, then time is irrelevant to him, or he's also the creator of time. So it's not like he's not contained or limited by that in any way. So yeah, I mean, that's just some words.
No, that's helpful. I mean, the example of the stars is helpful. I'm also just trying to think about how to differentiate between clear book and clear record, right? It says here Kitab al-Mubin as the clear book, or Kitab al-Mubin, and for the clear record it says Imam al-Mubin. I mean, what's the difference between the two? How does it matter to me? Yeah. But what is interesting to me though is that when it talks about the theoretical, while theoretical divine term specifies the states, forms, motions, and glorifications. So the glorifications of that tree also being related to this discussion of divine determining. I thought that was intriguing. But Brother Sohail, please take it away.
Assalamu alaikum. You know what I found interesting what Elder Rahman was saying, in that, you know, and it taught to your question about the difference between evidence and manifest. I think the important distinction is that, you know, I can just go through life and see things happening, you know, the revolution of like the heavens and the planets and the stars, and of the smallest to the atoms, their own revolutions, and then my own revolution, my own life, things that are happening, you know, physically speaking, like within my body, or like emotionally or intellectually. but it's not happening haphazardly. And I think that's the important reason for distinguishing between, as the Quran points out, between, you know, kitabum, uh, um, between the two books, between the clear book and the clear record. For between Imam Mubin and Kitab Mubin. Sorry, I was blanking on the phrasing in the Quran. And I think in the Arabic, like you really get that distinction between Imam Mubin, like as in like there is something, there is an Imam, there's a head, there's something which all people point to. For example, like if you go if in congregational prayer, everybody's following the Imam, and that everybody is just sort of a manifestation of the Imam's motions and command of when he bows and prostrates and when he recites. Likewise, the world is simply just in congregation behind, I guess if you want to use, you know, the creator as the leader, the head. In other words, he's the king behind which all things follow in accordance with his sort of his knowledge, his power, and his will. And so what I experience is just evident. It's just what I experience is the obvious manifestation, the physical, the maybe not even physical. I mean, because my thoughts and emotions are not physical necessarily, but what I experience in this world. And they all point to a history. In other words, I don't mean by history as in by time, but in other words, they're all known. They're all sort of in a complete and absolute record. Kind of like, you know, it's interesting, and it's not a coincidence of how I was pointing out, in that time has in it, you know, the entire record of history, that you can trace back time, or sorry, light, you can trace back light, and in light, you know, you can trace back the entire history of the cosmos. And that's sort of a manifestation in the same way, in that all things are preserved, all things are known. No matter what moment you experience it, it's sort of irrelevant. They're all preserved within a timeless, like a timeless absolute record that doesn't belong to me or you or anyone else who tries to think that there isn't anything, or who says, oh, the world is just haphazardly happening. You know, it's not known. It's just pure chance. It's just a roll of the dice. No, everything is known. Everything is, you know, everything is within a being's knowledge that's beyond the world. And it's theoretical because I can't actually grasp it. That's why I don't know if theoretical is the right translation of this Turkish word, but in other words, I can't experience it. I can't experience absolute knowledge. That's why it's theoretical. It's just my conclusion. It's the only, it's what everything necessarily points to. But it's not evident in the sense of it's not physically, it's not experiential in this world. I think that's really the important distinction, in that everything, you know, everything is just a manifestation of that. Otherwise, you know, what's happening in this world? It's just a roll of the dice, honestly. It's all chance. You know, it's like back to the earlier example of the Grand Canyon. It's all, or I mean, any physical phenomenon. You know, I can just attribute it to, well, by chance, some things happened in history and they all came together this particular moment, and then this happened, which is what people say about like evolution, in terms of, I'm not denying, you know, the science itself in and of itself. What I'm saying is people's understanding of history, it's all just to roll the dice. It's all just this and this came together. Well, how did those things know that to come together in this particular way, for something to happen in a particular way? There's no explanation for it. Oh, it just happened. But how does it happen? What is like the agency behind it? What is the determination for it? Oh, they just they know, things know. Well, how do they know? Well, I don't know. They just know. So it's a completely circular argument, or just a view of the world. Whereas this is saying, or what Norsi's saying here from the perspective of the Quran, is that no, things specifically are determined by the one who has knowledge over all things. And what I experience in this world is the manifestation of his sort of his command, his power and will. That's what's so obvious here in this world. But I may not experience absolute knowledge. I may experience a manifestation of it, but that is necessary from my observation of the world. So that's what I understand from that.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for that, Brother Sohail. Philly Gang, would you like to speak now?
So I think the author is building up an argument. His initial statement was big. He said, everything is written before its existence. And then he starts providing evidences for that. But he first started giving the example from seeds. Seeds, something that's right in front of our eyes. And from this seed comes out a well-programmed, as if the seed has the program of the plant. So it says, look, it's written. So this was the first example he gives, and very much supporting his initial claim. Everything is written before its existence.
And after it passes from existence.
After part is going to come as after a few paragraphs, it will come.
Okay.
So the first part, yeah. So the within the what's it, muqaddamah? What's the word for that? Introduction. So in the introduction, he makes two claims. Everything is written before and after its creation. The next paragraph starts, everything is before it's written, before its creation, and now starts giving examples. The first example he gave was about the seeds. Then the second example or second support evidence he come up with was everything's measure is obviously showing qadar. And then giving examples of this animal, this tree, like something right in front of my eyes. He's speaking about, look at your hand, for example, with its very curvature and everything, right in front of your eyes. And the food that you eat is going into, if it goes to the nail, it keeps growing. If it goes just 1 centimeter to the right, it becomes your skin, and it does not grow, like your fingers do not grow. So what is it that makes the particles stop in one side and keep moving in the other side? So he gave the example as such and said that there is an invisible, if you like, mold in there. If you would like to think about it as it happens by itself, but there's no mold, no nothing. So who is it? What is it that stops the particle over there? So he says everything is acting within a measure. But these are all the things that are happening right in front of your eyes. Then when it comes to the paragraph that we are now talking about, he says, even in the material and visible, obvious things, qadar is so evident, then he is now expanding the idea. He is saying that it's not only at the moment how it is happening, but for every single thing that you observe. Now, imagine time as space. You will then see that, oh, this small plant, it used to be a smaller plant and it's going to become a tree. And in every single stage of this is also knowledge at place. It's not only that it is being created right at that moment only with the knowledge, but also the transition between every, if you like, single frame of its creation is also within a knowledge as well. So he is further expanding the idea of how the creation is showing that everything is within a plan, within this measure, both in terms of spatially right in front of my eyes. This is what he was referring to as the clear book, Kitab al-Mubin. And what I understand from Imam al-Mubin, clear record, is saying that then you can extrapolate the idea, and in your mind, you can think about its past and its future, and you will see that it's not right in front of my eyes right now, but I can see it with my imagination or with my memories about the past by projecting it to the future, imagining what's going to come next. I think this is what it is meant by theoretical here. In Turkish, he is using the word nazari, Nazari can also be understood as like based on perspective. Like you look at it and you see it. You project your understanding to past and the future. So then you will realize that qadar, or this measure, applies to the past and the future as well. So I think he's just in here, he is expanding the, he started from what I see, what I can easily agree upon, and then he just keeps adding on top of it and says that, yeah, qadar is everywhere, not only in your finger that you see, or not only in that seed, but also in the every single stage of creation that comes out of that seed, or every single stage of your finger. You were like a small kid, your finger was still within an order. Now you're grown up, your hand and skin and everything has slightly changed, and it is constantly changing every day, little by little. And then there's going to come an age, if God gives us that long life, let's say 60, 70, 80 years, then you will start seeing that there are going to be wrinkles around this finger's skin. But again, still it's going to be within an order, and all the transition in between will be within an order. This is what you will observe. So qadar is spanning your entire existence, actually. And this is very much in line with how the author started at the very beginning. Qadar comes, belief in qadar comes at the end. Like all these are external observations that the author are showing to us. And eventually he will say that, how about me in this picture? Like other than those material things, how about the things that happen to me? How do I locate this in terms of qadar?
Jazakallah khair. Since we're coming to the end of our time, if anyone else has any last comments they want to chime in with, they should feel free to do so. If not, we can continue from this topic next week, inshallah. Okay. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا والحمد لله رب العالمين. Ameen. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for listening, engaging, and partaking in the discussion today. We'll see you all next week, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Please do not leave, just wait for a second after the stream ends.